Hello everyone and welcome to a most spectacular game from the penultimate round of this year's UzChess tournament. Praggnanandhaa versus Arjun Erigaisi. Both of them are still very much trying to win the tournament. Prague did lose those two games to Maksudlu and Taraport back to back. However, Arjun still undefeated. And here we have another example of players just trying to throw one another out of book as soon as possible. And here it happens as early as move 6. So let's check it out. It's quite an exciting game. Prague with white opens with pawn to c4. We have pawn to g6, we have pawn to e4, and pawn to e5, going for the Adorjan defense of the so-called Great Snake variation of the English, and knight to f3. A bit more popular is the immediate pawn to d4. We have knight to f3, knight to c6, and pawn to d4. We have captures and captures. So something like Marozzi bind against the Sicilian dragon, only without the Sicilian actually being played. Bishop to g7, and now again a pretty standard setup. Bishop to e3, played quite a lot. Sometimes people capture on c6, sometimes they bring the knight on c2. Prague, however, goes knight to e2, and it is now, as of move 6, that we have a completely new game. And as you can see by the situation on the clocks, or rather, you would be able to, if the previous game that I've covered, the Kasparov one, included clocks, so I forgot to update the interface. Give me a 2 seconds. There we go. All right, updated. So as you see, with the situation on the clock, Prague is a minute and 30 seconds on the clock. And also, sorry about that. Let me just, seems the autofocus is a bit off. Yeah, sorry about that. Oh, there we go. Still fixing that. But okay. So knight to e2, and okay, what do you do here? It's a pretty odd square for the knight. Putting it on e2, the bishop doesn't really have anywhere to go. It's very unlikely that you'll play g3 and fianchetto it, but it's very likely that you will be going to g3. So here, Arjun just goes pawn to d6. We have knight b to c3, and the immediate pawn to f5. Okay, he captures, we have bishop captures on f5, and now knight to g3, attacking Arjun's bishop on f5, and Arjun goes back, bishop to e6. Now, there are a couple of ways you could play it. Of course, check is always an option. You could first capture on c3, mess up white's pawn structure, then give a check, and then let's say bishop e2, go back bishop to d7. And if castles, you play knight f6, and all depends on what white plays. You castle king side or queen side. For example, rook b1 looks very dangerous, but you can castle queen side, and if bishop f3 also looks very dangerous, you can play b6, and everything is perfectly fine. However, bishop to e6 was played by Arjun, and now Prague goes bishop to e2. We have knight g to e7, knight g to e7, and both players just castle king side. So castles, and now bishop to g5. This is the first move where Prague actually spent some time, bishop g5, and some 6 minutes, but still doing much better on clock than Arjun. We have pawn to h6, bishop back to e3, and now pawn to d5. And this is... if you can play it, you should definitely play it. And the problem is, of course, Arjun could make some sort of a safety move like king to h7, but then Prague gets knight d5 in, and you can no longer play d5. So it's definitely a trade-off. You could try playing it with something like knight f5, maybe captures, and it's fine for black, but you have to allow the knight to remain on d5. Both players keep the bishop pair, and everything is perfectly fine. But here, Arjun played pawn to d5 right away. And it's not a game-losing mistake or anything, but it does allow Prague a very interesting idea. C captures on d5, knight captures on d5, and now bishop to c4. And the problem is, why I've mentioned that the king maybe should have gone to h7, even at the price of allowing knight to d5, is that now you can no longer trade. If you trade, that bishop on e6 is just hanging, and you're going to be down a piece. So here we have bishop captures on c3, giving up the bishop pair in order to survive this pin. We have b captures, and now king to h7, just nicely unpinning, and now bishop to c5. Now Prague making full use of his bishop pair. Rook to f4. You could play some other moves like rook to e8, rook to f6, rook to f4. Does make sense. You keep pressuring that f2 pawn, and you move it with tempo. So you're attacking the bishop on c4, bishop to b3, and now pawn to b6, chasing away the bishop. And Prague could definitely consider a move like rook to e1, because that bishop is very awkwardly placed, but he doesn't even want to consider trading bishops. So he keeps the bishop pair, bishop to e3, Knight to e5, sorry, not knight to e5, obviously, knight to a5, putting pressure on the light square bishop, and now pawn to c4. Again, rook to e1 is just very interesting, because after rook to e1, it's very hard to find a move for black. If you move the bishop, bishop f7 or bishop to g8, bishop f7 is very unlikely, as you can always remove the knight from d5 and then just go rook e7. So bishop g8 makes a little bit more sense, but then you go queen d3, and it's very hard to deal with this. For example, pawn to c5, you can just eliminate the knight, go rook e7 with check, then you pick up on g6, and all of a sudden white has a very nice position, in fact, a winning one. So after knight a5, pawn to c4 was played, also very nicely played by Pragg, knight to f6, offering a queen trade, and queen to c1, declining and attacking that rook. That is now perhaps awkwardly placed on f4. We have rook to h4. You could also play rook to d4. Rook to h4 may be a bit too ambitious. You could also maybe give up the exchange with rook captures on c4. But okay, Arjun can make such moves, as he is incredibly strong. Rook to e1 finally played, going after the bishop, and queen to g8 defending, and also putting more pressure on that c4 pawn. And now Pragg just plays queen to c3, and it's very hard to deal with all the threats here. The knight on f6 is hanging. Arjun defends it, queen to f7, and now you could play a lot of moves, but just for fun, I could ask you in many other positions, but feel free to pause the video and try to find the absolute best move for Pragg while I give you a couple of seconds. So, like I said, there are some nice moves. You could double up by rook e2, rook e1, or rook e3, rook e1. That's all very nice. You could play rook ad1. You know, no one ever made a mistake by playing rook ad1, but rook captures on e6. And this move is why I have chosen the quote above the board, as, I mean, more often than not, it is more important to see such moves than, you know, what Mr. Purdy said. Okay, you have to capture, otherwise you're just going to be down material. So queen captures on e6, and now comes rook to e1. That is the key move. It's the only winning move, but it's the only one that makes sense, since now the black queen really has nowhere to go. If you go, you cannot go to f7. If you go to f7, just rook e7, the bishop is guarding that e7 square. I know you forgot about it, but, you know, what are you going to do? And, you know, if you go all the way to g8, then the knight here is hanging, so the black queen is just overworked. We have knight to e4, and now just queen to c2. Again, the only move that wins, but not you know, a terribly difficult one to spot. There's a triple attack on the knight now. Rook to e8, defending the knight 3 times, and now all that's left is to attack it one more time. Pawn to f3. And that's it. Not a lot more that can be done here. Queen to e5 was played, sort of being a little bit tricky, trying to force Pragg to play f captures on e4, and then maybe, you know, you can hold on somehow. But Pragg calculates correctly, and he just plays the best possible move, and that is knight captures on e4. He allows queen captures on h2, and that's all there is to it. Queen captures on h2, check, king f2, and he was in this position on move 29 that Arjun Erigaisi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once, well, what else can you play? There are no checks, there are no tricks. You could, let's say, capture on b3, but you don't even have to recapture. You just have knight f6 check, and you checkmated the black king. Or any other line, for example, knight captures with check, king h7, rook to e7 with check, and now the white queen comes to finish the job. King to h8, queen captures, next move you get checkmated, and that's it. So doesn't really matter what black does. So yeah, only 29 moves, and this is how Pragg did it. You know, in a position where you think, you know, no one can surprise anyone, of course, everyone will either capture, like we said, or go bishop to e3, just defend, or sometimes very, very rarely go knight to c2. No, Praggnanandhaa played knight to e2, and that is, well, I'm not going to say that's all it took, but it definitely took a huge chunk out of Arjun's preparation, and he just didn't figure out how to play against this weird setup. I mean, when you look at it, again, I hate to say it, but it looks like something your uncle would play, or an extremely strong super grandmaster. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're going to check out the standings, even though by seeing the standings, I might spoil the results from other games from this round. If you guys don't want to know that, you know, stop the video here. But here they are. So Nodrbek leading the tournament with 5.5 points. Javo Kristindaro 5 points. Praggnanandhaa with this win tied with Arjun Erigaisi on 4.5 points. Parham, Richard Rapport, and Nodirbek Yakuboev 4 points, Jan Nepomniachtchi 3.5 points, and Shamsil Invokidov in 3 points. And this is what I said a couple of rounds ago, that we're going to have a really top matchup in the final round, as Nodirbek Abdusattorov is playing against Praggnanandhaa. So Prag needs to win in order to tie for first place. If Nodirbek wins, then Nodirbek is the winner. And it is, of course, possible for Nodirbek to draw, but Javo Krisindarov wins, so they will be tied. So everything is still possible. But I think Nodirbek Abdusattorov versus Praggnanandhaa will be the game to follow. And let me just quickly check, so I don't mess it up for you guys. Yes, Nodirbek will have the white pieces against Prag. So Prag has to go for a win with the black pieces. I think we're in for a treat. We'll see what happens. And also, I'm going to show the game Rapport versus Aravind, as it was also, fireworks. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Torkel Stenquist, Felix Steinels, Shadri Subramanian, Andres Schrade, and James Anderson for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check upon your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.